clip-on.
Your tie matches your flag, the flag, Daniel.
This is
Like
true.
that.
This is true.
All right, looks like we're live. We'll go ahead and recall to order our regular session of the Auburn City Council meeting on March 8th, 2021. We are on time, sort of. Clock's a little late. Sorry about that, everybody. We are coming out of closed session. We do not have anything to report out of closed session this evening. We'll go ahead and move right on to our Pledge of Allegiance. So if Amy, you could put, did I miss the roll call? Do we need to do that when we
Yeah,
come
I can
on?
do a quick roll call if you'd
Yeah,
like.
please. I'm sorry.
No problem. Councilmember Berlant,
I'm here.
Amara,
Present.
Dowden Calvillo,
Present.
Riddell Harris,
Here.
and Mayor Spokley.
I am here. Let's go ahead and move right into the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. And Daniel, thank you for the flag. Appreciate that. Next on our agenda is the agenda approval. This is a time set aside for the council members and or the public to speak or to ask for removal, postponement, or change of the listed sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by a roll call of the council. Do any members of the council have any agenda items that they want to rearrange on our current agenda? Councilman Berlant?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could just make the suggestion that we put the fire department report as the top of council business, just since we kicked them out of the last meeting. I know there were a number of people who are interested in hearing that. So I would just suggest we put that at the top of the business.
I'll second that.
I agree with that. I just want to ask John if we have any time sensitive folks from outside that might have a problem with that. Dave loves to watch our meetings from beginning to end, so I'm sure he's going to be here. But I do agree with the idea of putting him to the top just because he got bumped at our last meeting. Are we okay, John?
No, I think that's a great idea. I think the fire departments can bring a high energy presentation tonight, and I think everybody will benefit from them going first, so they can lead off for us.
Excellent. So I'm not sure I've ever had this happen before where we're moving things around. Do we have to vote on it?
So you can
Yes.
approve
Well,
the agenda as amended.
yes, that's what I would do. I'll move that we approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second.
Real quick, we have a motion, a second. Amy, do we have any members of the public who had any comments on the agenda?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Motion and a second on the floor. Amy, roll call vote, please.
Sure. Councilmember Berlant,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris,
Aye.
and Mayor Spokley.
Yes. All right, thank you, everybody. Next on our agenda is our consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussions of these items unless persons request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. To the council, do we have any council members that want to pull any of the items on our consent calendar? I see.
Yes. Can we, I was wondering if we can have, I thought you usually have John give a little report on each one first, and then maybe we can decide.
I do, and I keep forgetting that. So thank you, Vice Mayor Mara. John, if you would mind running through and giving us just a brief rundown of the consent calendar, that would be great.
Got it. Item number one are the city council minutes of the regular meeting on February 10th. Item number two is approval of the warrants for the month of February. As I've told everybody, last last time you got to approve all 9 months at the same time, so we've become more efficient. You're going to get 1 month. Now.
We appreciate that, John.
Item number 3 is the continuation of the COVID-19 state of emergency for the city. It extends it out 60 days, basically getting us into May. Item number 4, this is an amendment to the COVID-19 restaurant support program. This adopts a revised application, but it also does something for shelters. We've been working with the chamber, the business associations on various types of shelters. For the most part, what this does is it allows, as part of our over-the-counter permitting, that they would be able to come in, fill out the application. It will treat the structures as temporary structures, so it helps us as far as overall building inspection goes. It still requires that the shelters and anything outside have the approval of the building department. It requires that they adhere to all city, state regulations as far as safety, including fire safety. But at the end of the day, it allows for an over-the-counter submittal and an application received. Item number 5 is the reappointment of April Maynard as the Downtown Business Association's representative to the Economic Development Commission. Item number 6 is actually the first of what the council is going to start seeing on a regular basis of an on-call engineering services contract. In this case, we're moving this one forward. They bring expertise in dealing with development, subdivision agreements, and we know that we have at least one applicant that is ready to start working on that following the Collins annexation. Item number 7 is a professional services agreement. This is for human resources and payroll expertise to help support our human resources and admin services. And then finally, item number 8 is a little move around with some of the city council appointments. I think council members Berlant and Dowden Calvillo are switching assignments. Dowden Calvillo going to the alternate on SACOG, and council member Berlant will go representing with the Chamber of Commerce. And that is the consent calendar.
All righty, any comments from the council? And Councilmember Berlant.
Yeah, I'd like to remove item number 4, please.
All right, noted. Any other comments from the council? Amy, any comments from the public?
I do not receive any.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar minus item 4.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second as amended for approval of our consent calendar. Amy, would you please call roll?
Sure. Councilmember Berlant. Amara.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Spokely.
Yes. Thank you very much. Item number 4, amendment to the COVID-19 emergency restaurant support program. Councilmember Berlant, you want to go ahead and lead that?
Yeah, thanks. My only comment, I chatted with John this evening about my one item. He brought it up during the summary, which was just emphasizing the requirement that while we're waiving some items, the fire code is still required. And this came up recently. And so I've asked John, and I guess I would just ask in the approval that we add to the application a bullet that specifically calls out that they must adhere to the fire code. It is, I'll note that the very last bullet on the application says any other federal, state, or local laws or regulations, but related to heaters in tents has recently been a little bit of an educational item. And so I would just call out the fire code on the ask that we call out the fire code on the application so that it's clear to everybody involved when they're doing this. But other than that, I think this is a continued good step in streamlining our use of helping restaurants eat outdoors.
Thank you for that recommendation, Daniel. Excellent one. Any other comments on this item from the council?
So just to be clear, then, yeah, if there's the easy ups with the tenting with the sides, there cannot be a heater in there, and that would be adhering any type of heaters in there. Is that correct, John?
If the shelter, whether it's an easy up or whatever, is flammable, there are no heaters allowed in there. So, one of the things that we're working aggressively with, we do have a structure that is ready to go. If somebody comes in and says, oh, we're using structure X, it's straight out the door. It's not flammable. That's the issue is, if somebody can prove that it's not flammable and compliant with fire code, they can go for it. But the easy ups just aren't going to make it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alice, did I see you raise your hand?
I was just going to say that since we took this off consent, that I appreciate, John, your efforts with regards to this and working so diligently with our businesses to get them up and running during this time. So thank you very much for this. You put a lot of work into this, and glad to see that we're moving this forward. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Amy, do we have any members of the public that want to comment on this?
We do not.
Still no? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and ask that, or make a motion that we approve the COVID-19 Emergency Restaurant Support Program with the addition in the application that would call out that the fire code must be adhered to.
I'll second that.
All right, motion and second on the floor. Thank you very much. Amy, would you please call roll?
Councilmember Brilliant,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris,
Aye.
and Mayor Spokley.
Yes. Thank you all. Appreciate that. Next item on our agenda is public comment. This is the time provided so that people may speak to the council on items that are not on our agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. The council cannot act on these items that are on this agenda. However, the items will automatically be referred to staff. Council members shall have an option to speak for 30 seconds on any item not on the agenda at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and start it off, and then I'll move on. I saw your hand go up, Rachel. But I did see an email from ARD this morning. They made Kale Muscat made an announcement to all of us that the road on the mighty road down there that's so horribly maintained is actually going to be repaired by the Bureau of Reclamation. So I can't tell you all, and I'm sure you're all getting the same calls I'm getting about how many people are complaining about that and wanting the city to go down there and repair that road. We have our own struggles within the city limits. This is on Bureau lands. Very happy to see that email come in this morning. And I'm sure you all got it as well. So just wanted to make that comment so anybody who's watching this will know that finally that road's going to be put back together because it's in pretty abysmal shape. So that will be nice to see. And I'll move on to Councilwoman Riddell Harris. She had her hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to recognize today as International Women's Day. It has been observed for more than a century, since 1911, and the day recognizes the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women globally. And it's a call to action for gender parity. So since we have a female majority here on the City Council, I just wanted to recognize that today and all of the great women in the City of Auburn.
Thank you very much for that. Great addition. Yes, it's nice serving with you all on the council. I'm sure Daniel would agree. it's nice to see the parity finally coming to our council. It's been there before. It's good to see it back.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to quickly mention, if you had not seen, the Chamber of Commerce had exciting news, and I'm going to steal Jackie's thunder, but she's at the very end of the agenda, so people may be asleep by then. But
You'll pay for that, Daniel.
I know the Chamber did receive some additional funding as part of their grant dollars, and so they were able to. They're going to add more to the personal care services grants that they've been issuing to hair salons, massage services, and other personal care businesses that were impacted by COVID. So even though the deadline has come and gone, they've extended applications through this Friday. So I just wanted to get that out there, and hopefully we can all spread the word, because I know there are plenty of personal care services businesses that did not know that a grant was available and that free money is out there. So I would just encourage everyone to get their applications in by Friday. So thank you. And no disrespect, I just know that the audience level will decrease by the end of the meeting. We will all be here, and so will a few of our loyal watchers. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Lang. Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Councilwoman Riddell Harris for announcing International Women's Day. I appreciate that. I was going to say that too, so thank you very much. I just wanted to inform the council that the COVID package, the relief package, is currently in the House for concurrence on the Senate amendments. They expect to get that passed this week and on the president's desk for signature on Friday. Again, the city is set to receive about $2.6 million. That will be a check that actually comes to us from the state. There was a little bit of clarification on that. It's federal monies, and if cities that are a population of 50,000 and under, the monies go from the feds to the state, and then from the state to the cities or other municipalities that are under 50,000. The state has 120 days maximum to get the money to the city, and they are not allowed to do anything with it except to pass it through. So they'll use the same mechanism they used for the CARES Act. So that's the way we would actually receive the money. The formula for determining the amount was the CBDG formula. So there was a little bit more clarification on that as well. Also, just to let you know that there is money in the relief package for broadband. So that's something that's new that came with the Senate amendments. So that's something I know that we're looking at as far as our county is concerned, expanding broadband and ensuring our residents have accessibility, even in the city limits as well. So just look for that to hopefully land on the president's desk. It will be a partisan vote, but just wanted to keep you apprised.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo. Any other comments from the council? Alrighty, we're going to move on to council business. Our first item on the agenda is, as amended, the fire department year-end report. Chief Spencer is being added to the meeting here. Gotta hurry up and put your dress attire on, because you're probably in your pajamas thinking you're at the end of the agenda.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate all of the kind words. And to the rest of the council, for the record, Dave Spencer, your fire chief, and it is my pleasure tonight to report to you our year-end report. What I've done is stand up a series of documents to just articulate our accomplishments over the last 12 months as it relates to our accomplishments. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and work through that process. So if you'll just be patient with me for just a second. And okay. So as I said, this presentation is simply to receive and file. I think it's really important for us to be able to be transparent in the accomplishments and the items that we work on over the course of a year. As you know, I send out essentially a quarterly executive or a bi-monthly rather executive summary trying to capture the things that we're doing throughout the city. And then all of that information ultimately folds into our year-end report. So with that, I do want to just take a moment and share with you that this last year, as you know, has been with many challenges because of our COVID and pandemic environment. And regardless of whatever the challenge is year over year, we still have a core mission, and our core mission involves prevention, education, and ultimately emergency response. And I just want to reemphasize that as your fire chief, my focus is on preventative measures. That's where we start. That's the foundation of which we move from, followed by education to our community. And what that looks like is as we see trending in our data, that we see either a increase in emergency activities or a particular area that stands out, we provide that education to our community so that we can, again, prevent some of these activities that occur that are negative impact. And then ultimately our emergency response. And we do that with every bit of pride and honor as we underscore in our mission statement. I do think it's important to note that for myself as a fire chief, I'm in a constant evaluation. We have various impacts to our community that are either in the high frequency and high risk or low frequency and low risk and everything in between. And so as we talk about how we address our risk within the community, it's important to have a constant moving, or I should say nimble approach to how we address our risk and recognize that risk is risk. And regardless of whether it's low frequency or high frequency, it's still risk. And what I want to underscore is that, you know, in this day and age, a lot of our conversation revolves around wildfire and the catastrophic event that can be. But what I want to emphasize is that as we talk about the high volume and regular daily occurrence from our community for medical aids, and those medical aids are for people that are in trouble or are hurt and need our response. And so although it is low risk to the entire community, it is high risk for those individuals that are experiencing those things. So you can see the gamut of the types of emergencies that we respond to. And I want to emphasize that we are an all-risk city, meaning that at any given day, we can respond to any type of emergency, and our staff is trained and well-equipped to deal with any of them. Now, when we talk about community risk reduction and our prevention efforts, we look at the statistics this year. Because of COVID, we ended up sending out our mailers to our community members. The purpose of the mailers was a recommendation from one of our community influencers and previous Fire Safe Council chair. And that was to be able to communicate directly via mail of what our expectations were. So we took that concept and we built on that concept to say to our community members, here is the information, but now we want a call to action. And that call to action was for our community members to take that mailer and actually do effort or do work to reduce their parcel risk, if you will, and then send that mailer back to us so that we could capture the fact that we were actually making an impact. Where that came from was the idea that when you talk about advertising and the standard business models, that mailers are about 1% effective. And I didn't want to spend our hard-earned money here in the city just to get a low-level return on our efforts. And so we created in that call to action component. We did have about 65 complaints related to parcels. And then in addition, we've treated about 134 acres within the city limits. And in addition to that, as you can see, there's about 188 acres of the Auburn Shaded Fuel Break that's been treated under the guidance of the Resource Conservation District, and they're continuing their efforts, and we're supporting them with anything that we can. With regard to our education efforts, as I indicated earlier, that's part of our core mission. So we spend about 110 hours reaching out to our community in various forms and fashions. We reached a total of about 5,800 participants. And then we did an additional 17 structure ignition assessments on individual homes, where our staff went out to the individual homeowner, walked through their property, gave them feedback and various types of things that they could do to continue to reduce their risk within their own parcel and their home itself. In addition to education, we're also using our digital platforms. And you can see that we're continuing to increase in those that are following us for both information that's applicable to them, as well as emergency events. And that will continue to grow year over year. With regard to emergency response, we continue to respond to over 2,000 incidents every year. It is interesting, I'll note that this year we did see a little bit of a decline in our total incidents. And what I'll tell you over the course of my 30+ years of experience is that when there are significant incidents that occur, and this year we had many mega fires, and when that happens, for whatever reason, we tend to see a decline in 911 calls, because there is this perception that we are busy and that we're not available to respond to those types of emergency incidents. So it is an interesting anomaly to see that anytime you see an increase in these large scale incidents, that you do see a decline in 911 calls. I will note that when we talk about property loss and property saved, we did lose $435,000 worth of structure losses. But as a result, we can document that we saved over $4 million in property saves. And that is taking the property values and the direct actions as it's a result from our emergency response and the efforts that we put in place, and we're able to capture that information. This is just a snapshot of over the course of time during any particular day. We see our busiest times. We see that our average response times are about 3.5 minutes. I will note that our busiest day is usually on Mondays, and that our busiest months is March. And so it's just interesting data that we pull down that we know that as time progresses and we see these trends, that we need to be prepared. And so those are times where we don't take our units out of service for training or mechanical issues, because we know that we need to be in position to respond to said emergencies. Additionally, I will note that we've seen mutual aid that we've received, and then ultimately mutual aid that we provided, and the variance within that. And that's something that we keep an eye on year over year. In regard to dollars and cents, as I described, excuse me, we've had many conversations about fiscal responsibility and the impact of your emergency services, particularly the fire department, and the cost on the general fund. I take that seriously and look for every opportunity to try to minimize the impact to our general fund. One of the things that we were able to do year before last was secure an agreement with the CalJack process, where we're training our people. We're putting them through what we know is journeymanship process, where they will receive an actual certification as they complete the various training courses that are required. And as a result, we're able to recover some revenues to offset the costs of training. In addition, we've captured several various funding grants. We're going to continue to work and capture those Middle Fork project dollars year over year. We did work with our local LIMSA, Sierra Sacramento Valley Emergency Medical Services Authority, to capture some equipment. And then we reached out to the Assistance for Firefighters grant, the AFG grant, to be able to get decontamination equipment during the beginning of the COVID process. And so we're in a position where now we can clean our stations, we can clean City Hall. I know that we've had conversation at the beginning about hiring contractors and the cost that is associated with it. And here we find ourselves in a position where we can provide that service in-house. And I think that's a real value added that we can move forward with. As well as we're continuing with the backup generators from the Pacific Gas and Electric grant funding. Unfortunately, I will tell you that this was the year of the mega fires. And with that, we saw the 5 largest fires in California history since 1932. We have had several discussions since I've been here with as the fire chief in the city of Auburn, and those numbers are not declining. As you can see, we're talking about 9,000 incidents, 10,000 structures destroyed, $12 billion in cost. And so as I look into the horizon, it is clear to me that we are not out of the woods, so to speak. We're going to continue to see large scale fires year over year. I would encourage you, if you haven't seen the mega fire video that is on our website under the fire department, that explains what the topography looked like 50 years ago and what it looks like today. And we can talk about climate change. We can talk about fuel management and policy with regard to forest management. We can talk about, all kinds of different things. At the end of the day, it doesn't change where we're at. We're at an exposed scenario where our fuels are significant. Even with all of these large scale fires, there is still a tremendous amount of fuels that are out there that are ready to burn. We're watching the current trending with regard to our moisture patterns. It appears to me as though we're moving into another drought year. We haven't recovered from the previous. And so, these things are not going away. And why that's important to me as your fire chief is continue to do everything I can to reduce the risk to our community. As you know, we're a community at risk as identified on the National Fire Plan. And again, I want to emphasize that this is not the only risk that we face. When we talk about this year, here are the largest historical fires. The August complex was number 1. Our staff was assigned to that fire at one point. They were also assigned to the LNU complex as well as the North complex. Many of those fires, or all of these fires, had a significant impact. And ultimately, whether you talk about at the ground level where the fire was burning, or even the impact to our environment from toxic gases and smoke, certainly we had some impact over the years, over this last year, and it's a negative impact. And so it just underscores again why it's so important for us to try to reduce this risk and try to get ahead of this. We are a long ways out from resolve, but we're going to continue to work through that. So that being said, there's a couple of things that I want to point out to you. Your fire department spent 68 days this last year deployed on many of these fires. In addition, I serve as the Placer County Operational Area Coordinator for Cal OES, reporting to Region 4. Chief Walter is the Region 4 chief. And so when the requests come from Cal OES for additional resources and partner agencies to assist, it comes through him to me, and then we push it out, or I push it out to our county and our resources here in the county to respond to these types of incidents. I will underscore that there is a national cohesive wildfire management strategy, and it's important for you to know, really those 3 elements, as you can see, is about building resilient landscapes. Well, we're well engaged within the city and within our surrounding area to continue to work toward that. What that looks like would be a mosaic, if you will, of areas that there are fuel and aren't fuel. And that's how we get ahead of this process, is by not denuding the entire landscape by any means. It's about providing an area where the fire can't continue. And when we talk about fire behavior, it's about what's the carrier of the fire. And generally speaking, we were talking about grasses and small brush that will carry the fire across the landscape. But as you get into these large decadent forests, which many of these areas are directly related to us and around our area, we have to create some sort of break in that process. And that's where our shaded fuel break became part of our large discussion. But again, as your fire chief, I'll tell you as a subject matter expert, we need to go one step further and continue to do that mosaic approach across the landscape. Again, we want to develop fire adaptive communities. And how we do that is through education. Many homeowners are having to spend money in reallocating what they do with their home, whether it's about siding, whether it's about the eaves and boxing them in, whether it's about the grates on their ventilation along their eaves. These are all the kind of things that we can do to really make a significant difference in what the outcome is and with regard to anybody's structure or their home. And the idea is that we want it to stand alone without any intervention from the fire service. Not to say that we're not going to protect those homes. It's just the concept is that we want them to be able to survive in any given environment by doing these types of efforts. And then, of course, we want to maintain an effective wildland or wildfire response. And as I articulated, we here in California are the best in the nation about mustering resources and sending them to any given incident in large scale. And we can scale it up and scale it down quickly and be able to move from incident to incident. And you should be proud of what we're able to do within this state, because you're a critical part of that process. And then finally, I would simply say that we need to continue to align our priorities to maintain a safe community. I've listed out the concepts of preventative efforts, suppression efforts, education, vegetation management. All of these things all are intertwined. And we continue to work forward by not only adjusting our efforts, whether it's about our wildland inspection program, or whether it's about our codes and ordinances, or whether it's about our education efforts, or adjusting the shaded fuel break prescription so that it is more effective. So it's a landscape approach as opposed to just a hard, 300 feet or 600 feet. We really take into account really what the fire behavior is in the in-state, so that we can be effective as we find ourselves in these situations where wildfire is running and we need to stop it. And I'll tell you that the work that we've done so far is significant. It's not to say that we're by any means complete. We will continue this work year over year. I think what's important to note is that this doesn't happen in just one quick year's process. This is about changing the culture that we live in, and that it's a regular conversation from neighbor to neighbor, neighbor to fire department, council to community member, city staff to community member. It is a constant revolving process. And over time, you will find that our community will change their behavior, will change the culture, and this will become a high priority as we continue to message out, as we continue to enforce laws and ordinances, as we continue to educate. And so with that, really, those are all of the representations of what we've been able to accomplish over the year. At this point, I want to open it up and say my recommendation to the council is simply to receive and file the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Chief Spencer, I want to thank you for the wonderful year-end report. It's been a pleasure working with you over the last few years that you've been here at the city. Your reports are fantastic. The work that your team is doing and you are doing, not only here locally in our city and regionally, is something to be commended, and I commend you for that. We are a small city, but I do feel like we kind of carry a bigger influence with you on staff. So thank you very much for all you do for us, Chief Spencer. I've got questions, but I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the council to start. And I'm going to go bottom up. So I'm going to start with Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Sorry, I'm trying to mute. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Spencer, that was a great report. We really appreciate all the hard work that you do during the year. We really appreciate seeing everybody out, not just doing their job, but doing things in the community and being really supportive of the community. So thank you for that. I just had a quick question about Firewise communities and how that interacts with, I know it's done through the county, but I was just wondering how you interact with Firewise communities and how that relationship works.
Yeah, so great question. This speaks to developing a fire resistive community that I referred to earlier. The county has the Fire Alliance, which is responsible for those Firewise communities. And so the Luana Dowling, who is in charge of that program, does a great job interfacing with each of the community homeowners associations and groups that come together and walk them through the process of how they get one, approved to be a Firewise community, and two, how they continue their efforts on and go forward. How we work with the Firewise communities, and I'll use a couple of examples. Last year and the year before, we did some town hall meetings where not only Luana and the different Fire Safe Council members and community members came to be able to ask questions and really get a better understanding, but we were able to provide subject matter expertise as to what that looks like for them as they move forward, trying to improve their community. And really the end state is to say that for every community that achieves that Firewise component and does preventative action, is one less community that we have to worry about when a catastrophic event occurs. And so we'll continue that partnership. Luana does a great job at it. I can't say enough about the work and the effort that she does. It is a great program, and I want to encourage everybody to look at that as an option for their homeowners group or their close-knit community on a go forward.
Great, thank you so much. That's it for me.
Next on my list is Councilwoman Alice Dowden-Cavillo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief. I just like to also echo what Councilwoman Riddell Harris indicated. We're very pleased and very proud of you. And, you know, I've served on this council 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and you've really taken us to a second level. I really appreciate that. We've, you know, the grants that we've been able to obtain and the work that we're doing. Of course, things have changed, even just fire management wise, just substantially anyway. So, but I really do appreciate the level of professionalism. And also, you know, you're wearing several hats. You're not only, you know, working so hard to keep us safe from a fire perspective, but you're also managing the airport. So we really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. And your team we have a phenomenal team put together. So I'm very pleased about that as well. So thank you. Just a couple quick questions with regards to our third fire station. I wonder if you knew off the top of your head how many days that station has been open so far this fiscal year. Do you have that? Is that something you have, or if not, you can get it to us?
When you say how many days it's been open, meaning that we actually closed the station for the day?
No, I mean staffed fully. Are we staffing it every day? Is it fully staffed every day?
It is staffed every day. Now, there is time to time in which we'll take one of the fire personnel if they need to get into a class or spend a couple of hours on whatever the issue is. We may flex that to be able to accomplish whatever our goal is. Now, I will tell you that this last year, we were involved in doing some work with the Resource Conservation District and the Shaded Fuel Break. So we did commit our Station 3 personnel to do pile burning we did commit our Station 3 personnel to do some flagging and some fuel reduction work. So those are things that we've committed them during the course of their 24-hour period at work. However, the expectation is that if there is an incident that requires additional staff, that they peel off of that assignment and then respond to that emergency incident. And so, so it's this flexibility that we have with them to be able to use as what I would coin as value-added services to the community. One great example that when I first arrived here in the city of Auburn, My New Drive was a very big discussion with some of the homeowners in that area, and that they felt that it was neglected and that the roadside areas were overgrown and needed to be mitigated. Well, that was one of the things that we were able to do with our Station 3 personnel, was task them to be able to go in and do some reduction work. The great part about that is that many of our new and young firefighters need training in operating chainsaws and those kinds of things. So we use that opportunity as a training effort, and then ultimately they get certified what they will need for these large scale fires. And so it's a balance between the two. This community gets a benefit, but we, the fire department, get the benefit as well. So those would be examples in which we've peeled off our people to do what I would coin as value-added services.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. The other question I have is, do we have statistics available that tells us how many calls were responded by Fire Station 3?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't have that specific thing, but I can certainly send that to you as the council, and I could probably do that tomorrow so that you have those numbers. I apologize for not having that tonight.
Well, no worries. I mean, you can't have every number in your head. It'd be great to have a breakdown from each fire station, what the response, the number of calls have been. So that's really the only questions that I had. I do appreciate the review. We have this document so thank you very much for this. I always keep these and refer to them if I have speaking engagements and so forth. But keep up the great work. I look forward to our discussions during the budget process on ways that we can work to keep that fire station open, that third fire station. So that's just the basis for some of the questions I've asked you today. So thank you very much, Chief. I really appreciate it.
Certainly.
Thank you very much. Next on my list would be Councilmember Belant.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I agree. I think that the year in review report is incredibly helpful here and very well done. I think Chief Canan in his last presentation gave the best PowerPoint in the 7 years I've been on this council. I think this is the best year in review report we've seen. A lot of data, a lot of numbers, very easy though to understand. So, I just echo my appreciation. I have a couple questions for you. One is, you mentioned the work with the Resource Conservation District, and I know that they've hired their own staff to manage the CAL FIRE grant and the work that's being done in the shaded fuel break. Curious, what, if any, assistance are we providing to them? You had given the example about the fire department going and helping them burn. Are we still doing any of that, or is RCD pretty much at this point taking it all?
Yeah, at this point, they've been able to move into a forward position and really run the program. As you recall, there was a kind of what I would describe as a stall after the grant was received, change in leadership, change in staff. And so we really stepped in and filled the void for them during that period of time, got some contractors spun up and got work started. So that was really the primary focus for us. They did approach us recently for fire suppression assignments as it relates to being on scene for when they're doing their reduction efforts. That was something at the time that we couldn't support because we had many other priorities that we were working on. And so we said to them that it just for this short period of time when we're working on our own fuel reduction efforts, whether Middle Fork grant funding, for example, and some other things, we just weren't able to provide that service. But on a go forward, we will always evaluate and make ourselves available to ensure that we're meeting the overall goal. And so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. And I mean, I appreciate the effort, especially you and some of your battalion chiefs have put in managing that project until they could get their feet on the ground. So appreciate the update there. In the report, you provided some statistics on back-to-back calls. I think it was over 350 incidents. I know you're not a fortune teller, but I'm assuming that having the second station staffed played a role in our ability to quickly respond to those, almost every single day, back-to-back calls that we had. Curious, is there any metric that you're able to follow that if we did not staff that second station and we had to rely on a mutual aid from Newcastle or CAL FIRE, what additional response time that would have taken or damage that was done because it took time for the mutual aid to come into our city?
Yeah, so it's a relatively complex question. So let me start with how you set it up, and that is to say that at least one time per day, one of our units is tied up on an emergency incident, and meaning that we have to rely on our partner agencies to respond if we don't have that second engine, particularly Station 3. When you look at it by comparison, this year we only received mutual aid 81 times. As a result of having Station 3 open. Prior to that, 206 times per year, we're relying on our partners, and the closest engines, depending on where the incident is either up the 49 corridor or, as you described, Newcastle, south of us on the freeway, coming across. And so those are delayed response times. I articulated in our year-end report that our average response time is 3.5 minutes. Well, when you're coming down the 49 corridor or from Newcastle, you're looking at a 6 to 7 minute response. The important part about that discussion is recognizing that whether it's a fire or whether it's mutual aid, the impact is just as significant. We know that, and I'll start with the medical aid as an example. Time is tissue. It takes, when the heart stops and breathing stops, tissue begins to die. And so when somebody is clinically dead, the definition of clinically dead is at 6 minutes when there is no longer oxygen to the brain tissue. And that is damage that is irreversible. And so that's why it's so critical for us to be having these response times that are less than 5 minutes, because we can intervene and make a significant difference. Now, take that same scenario and put it to a fire scene. If your home has, and I'll use the most common example, a kitchen fire, where you have food on the stove, you're distracted for whatever reason, that fire now begins to ignite and catch the cupboards and surrounding area of the structure. In the new type of construction, new construction is lightweight, flammable. Most of the time it is synthetic products, and they burn really quickly. And so at 7 minutes, that's when you experience flashover. And flashover is a condition where the entire room and contents of the room ignite. Well, that is not a survivable environment. And so when you have that, you can guarantee that you will have a fatality as a result. So if you talk about response times, our 3.5 minute average response time, now once they arrive to the scene, now our firefighters have to deploy hose lines and apply water to the seat of the fire. Well, that's where we can make a significant difference in that 3.5 minute response time. Whereas if we weren't able to have that response time, you would experience a flashover and ultimately significant damage and potentially life loss in that fire environment. So not just medical scenarios, but also fire environment. And that even isn't to discuss the wildland fires that we're talking about on a regular basis here. So those are two examples I'd give you.
No, I appreciate that for sure. I mean, it's easy for us to say we need the second fire station. It's easy to assume that 2 is better than 1, right? It's easy to assume that 21 firefighters is better than 14 firefighters, but it comes at a cost. And so understanding the metrics of what are we getting out of having that second fire station, I think are incredibly important pieces for us, because I think as Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo started to lay the groundwork, it is a discussion item that at least I would hope that all of us, but maybe some of us, want to have in budget development. And so understanding, what is it that we get out of having that second engine? And so I guess I put you on the spot a little bit, from the fire department's perspective, are you going to ask that we continue to staff that second station into the next fiscal year?
Yeah, so let me be clear. You hired me as a professional fire chief. I came here and did a risk analysis on not only the city, but also the resources that we had available. At which time I determined that we did not have the adequate resources that I believe we need to make a significant difference in risk reduction, as well as property loss and life loss. So I came to this council and shared my professional opinion based on my education and experience. And I indicated that I needed an additional staffed crew to be able to be that proactive approach and reduce our risk. It is a policy decision for this council to make, and I recognize that it comes with a cost, and I don't take that lightly. And so, as you know, I came to you with a plan that minimized the impact to the general fund, recognizing that what I was asking you was a heavy lift. But at the same time, I also want to underscore that as a professional fire chief with over 30 years of experience, I'll tell you that a single station in this city is not adequate to provide the protection that we need for our community. And I'll continue that mantra into perpetuity. Our data supports it. It is indicated in many of the regulatory standards, whether you talk about national, the NFPA, or whether you talk about Office of Safety and Health Association. Any of the regulatory bodies dictate what our minimum standards are. And I'll tell you that we were not meeting our minimum standards. And again, I just want to make sure that you understand that my recommendation remains the same. I need those resources to be able to do my job to the fullest extent that we can. But again, if that's a decision that you decide that we're not going to do, I'll do what I can, but it will shift from a proactive effort and a risk reduction effort to really a reactive and response platform, because that's the best we can do. If you think about our staff from a time perspective throughout the course of their day, they're required to do many things. Those many things include equipment maintenance, include training. Their maintenance is averaged about an hour per day. They spend about 2.5 hours a day writing required reports. We're spending about 2.5 hours doing our inspection programs, whether it's business inspections or wildland urban interface inspections. And by the way, those are state mandated inspections in the business community. In addition, we're spending about 5 hours a day on emergency incidents. So when you start calculating all the time that is required for us to do the minimum requirements to maintain our credentials as a professional fire department, you're tipping into 14 to 16 hours over the course of a 24-hour period. Now, at some point, we need to allow our staff to be able to eat lunch and eat dinner. At some point in the evening, they need to be able to lay their head down and close their eyes. Not to say that they won't respond to an emergency at night. They certainly will. They recognize that that's part of their job requirement, and I'm proud of the work and the effort that they do. And I just would tell you that in over the course of the day, without that second unit, we're not able to disperse the commitment on incident times. We're not able to disperse the commitment to our inspections, education, and the proactive efforts that we're doing. And so it does make a significant difference for us in the end outcome.
Well, I appreciate that very detailed, but also very direct response about the value of that second station. Speaking of the station real quick, just a couple more questions here. We're almost 2 years into having the second station open. I know that, when you brought this plan forward, it really was a limited term type of idea as we look for a more stable and long-term funding source. Obviously, we know that Measure S failed. Just curious what the impact to our employees has been in the fact that we are still holding limited term positions, but now limited term has become multiple years.
Yeah, I would characterize it that it is very similar to the years of yesteryear, if you will, about grant funding. Grant funding is a finite time frame. It has a beginning and an end. The same is true with limited term staff. There is a set beginning and a set end. And so what happens is we will have staff that will come and take the position. Typically, it's an entry-level position. They'll get experience, they'll get training. And then at that point, they have to think about themselves and their family needs. And so at that point, once they have the training and the experience, they're able to apply to other agencies. I will tell you that many of our staff have applied to other agencies, and I don't blame them for that. And in fact, I'll take it a step further and say that I'm proud to say that our staff are able to be some of the top scores in competitive processes with other large agencies. And there have been a couple that have left to join other fire departments. And we're doing everything we can to keep the staff that we have. But I can tell you that with a limited term position, our staff will continue to look for other opportunities so that they can secure their long-term ability to survive in this world, both for their family and for themselves and for their professional goals. And so it is problematic to be limited term. I think if you think back to our discussion a year and a half ago, when I came to this council, what I was trying to demonstrate was proof of concept. And I think we've done that. I think clearly we can say that by having the staff that we have with the 2 fire stations open, we can demonstrate clearly the benefit both to the community, both to our risk reduction. And so I'll just leave it at that to say that by continuing to stay in a limited term position, we will continue to lose staff to other agencies as a result.
Thank you for that, Chief. And I'll just conclude here with the fact that I'm very concerned that we are not just losing good folks, but let's not forget that there's some dollar cents here. We're putting money into training them. We're putting money into getting them to the level that they're at. And then they walk out the door and another agency gets to take advantage of that. And so the retention of our good employees has to be a priority for us. And the fact that in talking to many of our firefighters, they're just working overtime after overtime, and not because of emergency incidents, but simply trying to fill behind these vacant positions because people were not retaining them. And so it's a vicious cycle. But I guess I just conclude with when we get into the budget development discussion, we need to talk about it's not just losing people, but it's money out the door. It's good, hardworking people that we are literally killing by doing this. And so, I appreciate the plan you brought to us back in 2019. It was meant to be a proof of concept. You proved it. But now we need to come up with making this a little bit more permanent so that our residents, are protected, but we're also ensuring that our employees are taken care of. So, Chief, thank you for answering those questions again. Very detailed. I'm likely going to have to watch this video back again and write down some of the stats you gave. But I would hope for the rest of the council that we've all kind of heard some very clear metrics that are going to take a role in our discussions with budget development. So, Chief, thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councilman Berlant. I think we're down to Vice Mayor Amara.
Thank you, Mayor Spokely. And thank you, Chief Spencer. I appreciate not only your wonderful report, thorough report. I love the specificity, but I appreciate your passion. I'm impressed. Thank you. I'm very, you've answered so many of my questions. But I will have you expand, since you explained things so well. I will have you expand a little bit. First of all, how are we able to manage, you indicated that we have 2,000 emergency calls a year. That's that's a lot. How are we able to manage these emergency calls when our firefighters are deployed for 68 days a year? And you impressed upon me that coming from our sister stations is a very brilliant delay in time. So I would like you to explain that to the public, and how does Fire Station 3 help in that regard, or does it?
Yeah, so this speaks back to the original plan that I brought forward with the fiscal impact to our general fund. So if you think back to 2019, I brought up a template that showed that by having 2 stations staffed, what that allows us to do is on any given shift, we have 3 platoons or 3 shifts. We have 2 stations open on A shift, 2 stations open on B shift, and 2 stations open on C shift. So they work for a 48-hour period. And during that 48-hour period, they respond to the emergencies. So A shift comes to work for that 48-hour period. B shift now comes and relieves them, and they go home. Now, during that B shift or second platoon, there is a call for a large-scale fire. Take the North Fork complex, for example. And so we determined that we're going to take the Station 3 crew and we're going to deploy them to the North Fork incident. So at that point, Station 3 comes unavailable or is not staffed during that day that they're deployed. Now, whether it's the first day or the second day of their rotation dictates on how long that station remains open. It is either one 24-hour period or 2 24-hour periods, depending on when they're dispatched, and generally less time than that. Now, the next shift comes in, C shift or the 3rd platoon, and they cover both Station 2 and Station 3. So there is very little impact to our community because we've still maximized our coverage as a whole. And so by downstaffing that station while they're deployed, that allows us to recover that funding source to help offset the impact of the general fund. And so the impact is minimal. So I realize that it's a little bit complicated without being able to move the chess pieces on the board. And I wish I had my graphic to illustrate it, but that's essentially how it works. And then when they return back to work, on that shift becomes whole again and is covered on all 3 shifts.
And then from your prior, I think it was a answer to some question, you indicated the time spent on doing calls and writing reports and investigating businesses or licensing, that kind of thing. But so is it fair to say then that we need the same level of workforce throughout the year, even in the rainy, slower months?
Yeah, so like anything, there's an ebb and flow to the work that we do. The best example I can give you is during the summer months, as you know, when it heats up and we start to see these wildland fires break out. It's a drawdown on resources throughout the region or throughout the state. That's really becomes our focus. But now, as you turn the corner and you get into the time of year that we're in now, where it's cooler, it is wetter, now our risk changes. And this is where we see an increase in cooking fires. We talk about an increase in fires as it relates to the holiday season. We do a pretty robust social media output and education effort about candles, about cooking fires, about overloading circuits during the holiday season. We see people use their heaters. We see people use their fireplace. And so we end up responding to these type of emergencies that are totally separate than the types of emergencies that we do see during the summer. What does remain the same is the medical type emergencies. Those medical emergencies remain the same throughout the entire 12 months. There is no rhyme or reason to the seasons with regard to medical emergencies. And remember that in the United States, the #1 killer is cardiovascular disease. That is a heart-related emergency. And then the second is strokes. And so those are very time-sensitive events. And as I articulated earlier in our conversation, time is tissue. And it's our job to get to that emergency scene, provide supplemental oxygen and intervention to reduce that impact of dead tissue and reverse the course of that outcome so that people survive those events. And so I will tell you that it doesn't matter what season we're in, the demand for service remains the same. It's the types of calls that change.
And my last question, thank you, I appreciate that. My last question is, Fire Station 3 has 7 firefighters, is that correct?
No. When you talk about Station 3, there are 3 assigned personnel per shift. And so you'll see, and where the 6th, the 7th is my 3rd battalion chief that was eliminated before I got here. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But when you talk about the 6 firefighters, what we did was we moved our staff around and we allowed our people to move and promote up into higher ranks so that we could hire at the lowest level, meaning that we hired at the firefighter level. So when you talk about the 2 stations open, you have a firefighter at Station 2 and a firefighter at Station 3, that's 2. And then you do that again on the A shift, B shift, and C shift for a total of 6. So that's how we got to our 6 firefighters. And then as I indicated, our battalion chief is actually the 7th that we have implemented. I think there was some thought that prior to my arrival that the fire chief would assume the role of responding to emergencies on that 3rd shift. Well, I'll tell you that my role as the fire chief needs to be working on the strategic level, working on the level of program and development and providing guidance. What that would look like is if I had to play the role as the battalion chief, I would literally have to be in the station for 10 days a month. I would not be able to attend the meetings that I do, nor would I be able to do the work that I do in the capacity that I have. And so I think there was a fallacy to think that the fire chief could actually absorb that job component and still do the job that I'm functioning in today. Now, I'm probably going to eat crow because as Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo indicated, I'm handling the airport and some of the other city staff as well. But those are from administrative functions. If you actually take me and put me on a response vehicle responding to incidents and dealing with the day-to-day emergencies, there's no way that I could do the job that I'm doing today because of the impact.
Well, I want to again thank you and echo again my appreciation for all that you do and the firefighters do. And that is valuable information that we'll take a look at in our budget and our strategic planning coming up. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Mara. I do have a couple of quick questions for Chief Spencer. I'll be brief. We've gone long and my fellow council members have asked lots of really great questions, some of which were on my list. Real quickly, and Chief Spencer, I think you and I exchanged some messages about this. As you know, one of the things that's kind of near and dear to my heart is private property management and private property ownership responsibilities. I know that there's nuance there and there's circumstances where if somebody's got a piece of property that's privately owned that has little or no value, it's really tough to get them to go out and invest in their property and clear it when they need to. But I just want to leave you, and this is a comment, not a question. Well, I'll start with the question. How many parcels are we out there actively maintaining based on whether it's grant funds we get or city expenditures that are privately owned, and it's just based on, you know, delinquent property owners who aren't maintaining their property in some of our canyon areas, canyon rim areas, and the like? Is it a significant problem? Am I overblowing this? I get the sense that it's maybe a bigger deal, but maybe I'm wrong. Do you have any sense? And I know I'm asking you for numbers, and that's not really fair, but are we talking about a large number of private property owners who just have vacant property, who, you know, no homes on them? They're just property and they don't maintain them?
Well, Mayor Spokley, I appreciate your delicacy in asking the question. I do have numbers for you, and I'm happy to answer your question. I'll articulate it this way. When we talk about, and I'll put it in the category of weed abatement or fuel reduction, this year we received 65 complaints against parcels. And of that, we've cleared 134 acres over the course of this year. That is a significant reduction in fuel. And that is with compliance through education and follow-up, and really the firefighters' efforts of staying diligent with the property owners. There are cases that are currently active. There are 4 cases that have gone through code enforcement. Those 4 cases represent 6% of our total cases of complaints and non-compliance. Of the 4 cases, 1 has a warning citation currently, and 3 have received fees and citations. Now, you and I have had conversation in past, and so prior to my arrival, it revolved around the codes and ordinances of the city and the sequence of steps that required us to go through to be able to mitigate the problem. And I remember early on, as we began to develop our relationship, that there might have been a level of frustration in the time that it took, because once we received the complaint, it was many months before we were able to get it moved through the process to actually take action. That put it into the November, December rainy season. And then at that point, the pushback was to say, well, it's not an issue right at the moment because we're not in a fire hazard. So what we've done is be able to partner with the police chief and really use his code enforcement process and his expertise in being able to move a complaint forward, be able to assign a fee associated with it. So the beauty of it now is that it's much more expeditious. We are actually collecting fees up front, and the parcel owner still has to complete the work, as compared to the old process, as you know, where we were only left with applying the fees as a result of the mitigation efforts onto the tax roll. And we may or may not see that down the road. In many cases, it would be years before we would be able to collect that. So because we've changed our process and used our police department to help us navigate through that, we've been able to have great compliance as well as collecting fees as a result.
Great answer to my question. Thank you, Chief. I guess I'll just close with a comment. If there are property owners out there who own vacant land, who are delinquent in their responsibilities to maintain their vacant land, I think it's incumbent upon us, the city, to enforce that they comply. Now, there are certain circumstances that I completely agree that, you know, that are over and above, we ought to take special compensation for. If they don't have the monies to do it, if they're disabled, if there's certain reasons why the maintenance can't happen, I get it and I'm sympathetic to those reasons. But if they're just ignoring the letters that you and your department send out, and they're ignoring the requests from their neighbors to maintain property, unless her property has literally no value, which is pretty unusual in the city of Auburn, there ought to be a process for us to lien the properties. So when the properties sell, my wife and I just bought a piece of property, a vacant piece of property. We paid money for it. And if there were liens on the property, he would have had to pay those liens when he transferred the land to us. So I don't want to lose sight of that. I know you've got a whole bunch of stuff on your plate. Your department is doing a fantastic job, and I commend you and your department and your battalion chiefs for all the work they do. They're helping us figure out exactly how we clear our vacant land that we now own. But I don't want to lose sight of personal responsibility to maintain what you own in our city. And I know that we do have some grants that afford us to go and clear privately owned property. And as it pointed out to me earlier from our city manager, that sometimes those properties have little or no intrinsic value, resale value. So it doesn't do us any good to try to chase a property owner because they own it. We don't want to own it. It's just a vacant piece of land, privately owned. And so I understand all of those, nuances to this question, but I don't want us to all lose sight of pursuing, I'll call them delinquent property owners who don't clear their lands to protect not only themselves if they live nearby, but their neighbors who unfortunately live next to somebody who's not maintaining their property. So I guess that's a comment. I do have one other question that I'll close with. The Firewise program, and you talked about it in your presentation, and maybe it was a question as well. Does that Firewise program in our community have a positive effect on our ISO rating? And more importantly, does it have a positive effect on our insurance rates that folks in these Firewise areas might experience? And it's a bit of a loaded question. I know the insurance thing is a challenge, but what are your thoughts on that?
So you're talking about two different elements. ISO, the insurance rating that we receive, is based on the city's ability to respond, train, and the infrastructure within the city, meaning water sources and those types of things. And we get scored based on a myriad of elements. Education is one of those components as well. So that's what gives us our score that then in turn should directly relate to your homeowner's insurance and your ability to be able to obtain that. Firewise Communities is a completely separate entity in and of itself, where the community is now taking responsibility for, and I'll just use a homeowners group as an example, that they come together and they do the effort of hardening their homes and doing some Firewise activities to include fuel reduction so that their community would survive in a catastrophic wildfire. So they're two separate elements, both of which though work hand in hand. The more the property owners do collectively, the greater the risk reduction is, as well as we work as a professional fire department to improve our ability to respond, provide education, all of those infrastructure elements that come with the ISO rating. Now, all that being said, ultimately, we need to work hand in hand together to be able to have the maximum impact. And I'll tell you that what's happening with legislation, and I'm watching it carefully as we move forward, that ultimately I believe there will be some significant elements that impact the insurance companies as to how they rate communities, not just on a large scale map that just puts it into a broad category. I think you're well aware that on one side of the street, an insurance company would counsel a homeowner, and on the other side of the street, they would keep it, and there seemed to be no rhyme or reason. Well, ultimately, what we're trying to do is is as fire chiefs collectively throughout the state put political pressure on the legislation to come up with a model that the insurance company recognizes and gives credit for the effort that the community, homeowners, fire departments do in risk reduction, so that it's a true measurement. As you know, it really is about profit and loss. Insurance companies are about profits, and when their profits decrease and they absorb significant losses, the direction is to say we need to shed those losses and move to a different environment. So we need to correct that at a much higher level. But in the interim, what we're doing is trying to set up programs that I believe are sustainable. I believe you received from one of my battalion chiefs a document that we're bringing forward about our wildland urban interface inspection program that really demonstrates the things that we're looking for, recommendations, as well as spinning back to indigenous vegetation models so that we're not using invasive species in the city of Auburn. And it's not to say that we can't have vegetation. We just need to focus on the right types to make our community survivable. So I know that's a long answer, but I hope that clarified it for you.
It did, and I look forward to that hardening handbook to get released to the public, because it's going to be a great document. So, Chief, thank you again for your. Wait, I see Daniel. Daniel, go ahead. You had a question.
Sorry, if you don't mind. Obviously, in my day job, I oversee FireWise for California, and so I just wanted to add to the chief's point and to your question. There are actually 3 insurance companies in California that already do provide an incentive if you live within a FireWise community. USAA gives a 5%. There's a little bit of a formula. Mercury Insurance has, I think, up to an 18%. And the FAIR plan, that's governed by the state, has a 10%. And then to your second portion, the Department of Insurance is about to release some regulations that would require insurance companies to make public a resident's risk and allow residents to be able to more or less question whether that risk value is accurate. So as the chief mentioned, there is both legislation, but also regulations that are being worked on in this space. And so it may behoove us as a council as well, and maybe the chief can provide us some recommendations, but it may behoove us to send a letter to our legislature to make sure that they're weighing in, because I do think that as the chief is working to incentivize more and more FireWise communities, a financial incentive, and more importantly, a recognition is critical. And the only reason I really bring it up as well is if you want to see my latest insurance denial for where I live after I got denied from the company I'd been with for 10 years for a home that is not in the Canyon Rim, but in the city of Auburn. So I'll be canceled at the end of the month. I think it may be a good legislative stance for us to weigh in on. So just wanted to add that in. Sorry, Chief, to jump in, but just wanted to make sure that the public watching knows that there are financial incentives for being a FireWise community.
That's very, very good information. Thank you, Councilman Berlant. And we've all talked about the insurance situation as it relates to our fire department, the number of stations, the amount of water, all those things that Chief Spencer outlined. And it's critical for many of our citizens. They're getting canceled like Councilman Berlant. And whatever we can do to kind of help bolster that, whether it's writing letters to our legislature, whatever it may be, let's get on that. And Chief Spencer, we look for your kind of guidance on where we can apply pressures, if we can apply pressures, to kind of help those situations. So again, I want to thank you for the thorough report. Well done. Again, look forward to our budget cycle and the ongoing conversations about how we continue to support Auburn Fire and all the work that you guys do. So thank you very much for that. That was a receive and file item. So we will go ahead and move on to our next item, which will be the adoption of the pension funding policy. And Amy is going to bring in Mr. Heath, I'm assuming. And John, do you want to start this off, or should we go directly to Andy to start the presentation here?
Yeah, I know since Andy's popping on, Mayor and Council, as you're aware, we are pursuing the idea of issuing some pension obligation bonds to support and reduce our overall costs as it goes towards our overall pension. One of the things that is required, we as a city are evaluated by not only the underwriters and the people who would buy our bonds, but most importantly, we will go through an evaluation with the various rating agencies to determine the credit worthiness. And one of the things that they evaluate is the policy basis under which the city operates. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Andy, and he can talk about the recommended policy document that he's bringing forward.
Great, thank you, John. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. For the record, Andy Heath, the city's finance director. As John mentioned, what I'd like to do tonight is kind of go through the pension funding policy. And this kind of cues up what the city's getting ready to do in the issuance of a pension obligation bond in the next couple of months or so. Just as a side note, we expect that the rating agency presentation that John did talk about just now will occur hopefully by the end of March, where we'll actually get together with more than likely Standard & Poor's, and actually go through an array of information concerning the city, both demographically and fiscally, to get that rating. Ultimately, that will lead to the 26th of April, when we anticipate, at least at this time, on being through everything and actually bringing back what's called a POS, or a preliminary official statement, back to the city council with all bond documents and everything that we intend on doing moving forward. Nothing will be decided essentially until that April 26th date. As part of this process, as we go down the road to making sure that we are really in check in terms of our policies, procedures, and everything that we have in place to garner that more favorable rating from the rating agencies, is these types of policies, where this pension policy is, although very generic, is something that will demonstrate to the rating agencies and all the stakeholders of our bonds that we actually have a plan about how we're going to approach pensions moving forward. This pension funding policy is intended to memorialize criteria to be considered when funding pensions, while providing transparency in pension costs and the ultimate pension funding process. Some of the goals of this policy include providing guidance in making annual budget decisions. And as you know, we come back to you multiple times a year with what those pension costs look like in that famous graph. And that's part of this process as well. Another goal is to demonstrate prudent financial management practices by having this policy in and of itself, and recognizing that we are interested in making sure that we make those obligated pension payments on an annual basis. To create sustainable and affordable budgets related to pensions. Obviously, we don't want pension costs to be the largest cost in our budget, even though at this point in time it is. So anything we can do pursuant to this policy and some of the actions that we take will really enable us to continue to maintain a sustainable and affordable budget. To reassure the bond rating agencies, and then again, to show employees and all stakeholders how pensions will be funded. So all the tenets of this policy, if they're followed, will actually demonstrate, as we've done in the past, we just haven't had a policy, that we're actually interested in how we fund these things moving forward. As you know, each year the city does prepare its budget and a multi-year forecast, which outlines the fiscal requirement associated with funding pensions on an ongoing basis. These requirements regarding concurrent and future funding for normal and unfunded liability costs are taken from all the actuarial reports that CalPERS provides. So none of this is made up. It's taken right out of the actual reports that CalPERS gives us on an annual basis. So these numbers are real. The requirements for any debt service payments are also noted pursuant to the policy. So as you know, right now we do have a pension obligation bond that we're paying down that will be refunded with our existing UAL debt through CalPERS into one issue. So all of that will be considered. And then, of course, the funded status of the plans is noted, where ours is about 70%, 71% funded on an aggregate basis. Based on these fiscal requirements, the City Council may consider an array of options in making pension funding decisions. Some of the things that you might want to consider moving forward, pursuant to the policy, are making additional payments above and beyond the required unfunded liability. We have not really done this in the past. We've just made our mandatory annual payment pursuant to the actuarial reports that are issued, but that doesn't preempt us from actually paying more down if it were cost advantageous to do so. At this point in time, it might not be, but these things will be considered in the future. Issuing pension bonds when aggregate savings exist. This is what we're considering now. So we're actually going through the process of really looking at how much a pension obligation bond might save us in the future, and whether or not we should be moving forward given the current very low interest rate environment associated with municipal debt. And then consideration of a pension stabilization trust fund, otherwise known as a Section 115 trust, where you have a specific assignment of reserves and or putting money into the trust itself that can only be used for pensions. It can be used for any pension costs, but it demonstrates that you're very interested in making sure that you make these costs, and then you can set these monies aside to earn interest in a separate pool, and then ultimately use those for earning pension costs. So all of these things are more or less covered by this policy. And again, this policy is more or less meant to memorialize what we currently do, but to demonstrate to everybody that this is what we do from a written perspective. It essentially checks that box as part of the whole rating agency process that we're going to go through. So this policy will be reviewed at least every 2 years, and then adjusted based on any changes regarding pension resources. And if we do issue the bond, all that will be updated. And again, some of the provisions of this policy may change as well moving forward. So with that, I'll stop. That's a lot. Hopefully we've covered everything, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Andy, very much for your report. I will go ahead and open it up to the council for questions, and I'm going to just go around the screen here. I will start with Councilmember Langt.
I don't have any questions. I'll just quickly comment that, Andy, I thought the document you put together, the policy, was very thorough, and appreciate us getting this policy set on the books before we go and look to refinance those bonds. So nice work. No questions for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Riddell Harris, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only question is, if everything goes well on April 26th, then when would we put the bond out? What's the kind of timeline on that?
Well, the POS will be approved and the documents will be approved on the 26th. So it's typically within a week after that. So okay. It's pretty quick. Yep.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's go Vice Mayor Amara.
Thank you. I have no questions.
You guys are moving around on my screen, so.
Thank you. I have no questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Dowden-Calvillo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate, Andy, you're putting this policy together. I think it's about time. So as we move forward in our pension obligation bond. So thank you very much. And I don't have any questions either.
I think everybody has kind of stated the questions I had. I did shoot you a couple of questions, Andy. Hopefully you get a chance to look at them. Maybe they're already in my inbox, but I've got
I have a queued and ready to go, Mayor.
All right, I appreciate that. We've got a meddler in often attendance that's got questions for us related to this. So I'd like to be prepared to answer those in the morning at 7 a.m. So
I need to go over with the manager.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you for the report. I have no real questions on this item. Amy, any comments from any members of the public?
No, I just checked live and we did not receive any public comment on this item.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up for a motion or additional comments or questions.
Well, I will go ahead then and move that we adopt the pension funding policy.
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Amy, would you please go ahead and call roll?
Councilmember Berlant,
Aye.
Amara, Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris,
Aye.
and Mayor Spokely.
Yes. Thank you very much. Let's move on to item number 11. City of Auburn pre-approved accessory dwelling units ADU program.
Okay.
I think, is John taking, who's taking this? Tanya, John?
I have John May coming into the meeting right now.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Mr. May, welcome. Looking forward to hearing this item. Your program here seems fantastic. So tell us more about it.
Thank you so much. Good evening, City Council, Mayor Spokely, John May, for the record, your building official. I am super excited about this program and thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss it. We're calling this program the City of Auburn Pre-Approved Accessory Dwelling Unit Program. So what that is a program of pre-approved accessory dwelling units per the title. There are 3 sizes that staff has kind of settled on, and there are reasons for those sizes I can discuss later. So I do have a brief background, and then I have a short slideshow which will kind of visually demonstrate the units that we are thinking about. So after hearing discussions in September of 2009 at the Joint Planning Commission and City Council housing meetings, staff recognized a need for affordable housing and obviously additional residential units. And we do recognize a desire by the council to facilitate and implement a program or programs that would increase the public's ability to obtain affordable housing. We also recognize that we have limited control as staff over cost of housing and design. But for those reasons, we began to explore opportunities to make design of residential units more affordable. So soon after those meetings, staff began contacting engineers, architects, designers, and other industry experts to assess interest in our program or participating in a conceptual program at that point. We found the interest was high. However, the lack of funding was an obvious hurdle that we needed to overcome. To that end, our planning department staff was able to secure some grant funding through the SB2 grants and LEAP. Big thanks to Tanya Ward for that. She was instrumental in that funding coming through for us. Interestingly enough, early in 2020, city staff was approached by Placer County staff who had also got some grant funding and were interested in starting their own pre-approved ADU program. At that time, they inquired if we'd be interested in participating in an interview panel for designers, architects, and engineers, which we agreed to. We did, between us city staff and Placer County staff, we did interview several applicants. We did respond to the most responsive applicant. And although it's taken some time due to COVID, of course it was during COVID, the plans are finally nearing final approval. And the interagency agreement between the city and Placer County will be reviewed soon. It's probably important to point out at this time, there are no anticipated costs to the city besides staff time, because this program is entirely funded by city and county grants. So let me see if I can pull up this slideshow. I think you should be able to see that. Let's see.
Yeah, we can see your screen, John.
Okay, perfect. So obviously we have the city pre-approved program, and we are looking at 3 different sizes of accessory dwelling units. The first one being a 496 square foot model. The reason for that number is to get us below school fees. Again, we were looking to save costs and the threshold is 500 square feet. We did have some fun playing around with the names of them. We think they're appropriate names for not only the city, but the county as well. So that was a really fun exercise for staff to get together and come up with those names. Here you see it's kind of a layout and a little different view of one of these structures, still the 496. And I apologize, it's a little blurry. I couldn't get it to reproduce well that page. This is an artist rendering by a local artist. You probably recognize the name if you can see it, of kind of the 496 square foot model in an area on a hill, as we have here in the city. We did design all the models to have slight engineering for some minor hillside. Obviously, we couldn't design all the extreme slopes that may be located in the city. Here's our 599 square foot model, again, named by staff. And we're also currently working on a checklist, or what we would call an applicant's guide, to walk applicants through the application and approval procedure. One of my favorites, here's one that shows the 599 in relation to the existing house. As we know, these are accessory dwelling units. The thinking being there will be an existing house along with these units. In addition, I'd like to point out, they've all been purposefully designed with porches, some in the front, some in the rear, some in the front and rear. And that was purposeful because in these small units, it's important to have spaces that are usable that aren't included necessarily in the living space. This is our 749 square foot model. Some of my favorites, they get a little bigger. And this one does have a front and rear porch. We also have a brochure under development for advertising purposes that you'll see coming out soon. And we'll get that out to applicants. We've had a lot of interest in these units from the public, everyone we mentioned too. We do have a lot of interest in ADUs in general. And for the last several months, we've been telling you all just wait until spring rather than design your own. And that's the end of my slideshow. So we recognize that it's an interesting program. Again, no cost. We're continuing to partner currently with Placer County, and we do have a tentative implementation date. Is going to be June of this year. That's the goal, to where we actually hit the ground and have these plans approved and ready to go for customers. Again, it's an informational item, but I would love to hear any questions or comments you may have on the item regarding this proposed ADU program.
So, John, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sure all the council members have questions. I reviewed this when we got the agenda packet and was super excited to see it. Couple of quick questions, and then I'll turn it over to my fellow council members. If you know, once this program goes live, if I walk into City Hall to your counter and I say, I want to build an ADU, you have a menu of options that they can pick. I think 8 or 12. I don't know. There's a lot of them, different sizes, different elevations. I pick one of those. I must pay a fee to buy the plans. How does it work? I mean, how do I go from walking in, saying I want to build an ADU to getting a permit for the ADU to going to construction to build the ADU, John?
Sure. Well, so there are a couple things the applicant needs to provide that we won't be able to provide for them. One is going to be a site plan. You have to locate the ADU on the site plan. Where is it going to be? It doesn't meet the setbacks and all those other requirements that we already have in place. The other is going to be the energy calculations, for lack of a better term.
Title 24, yeah.
Yes, Title 24. Those are going to be based on the orientation of the structure. They all are, so they will change, and that's why we couldn't come up with a pre-approved necessarily Title 24 package because every orientation is going to be different. Those will include solar. Solar is required on these new, currently anyway, unless the law changes, on these new buildings, and it will be included in the Title 24 package. Other than that, they simply point to what they want, provide those things to us. We've essentially, the plan check fee goes away because it becomes a processing fee of processing paperwork at that point. So the savings, well, I can give you a for instance, the 496 square foot ADU would cost about $800, and that's going to cover all inspections, any plan check, the processing fees, and all that out the door, and obviously no school fees are involved. So it's a savings of not quite 50%, it's about 40% what it would be. And then it kind of increases a little bit each time for the larger ADUs. Generally, they're all about a savings of about 40%. And then the obvious savings is in the design costs. As you know, you had to hire an architect, an engineer, or those type of professionals, and they're not cheap to get that stuff done. So that was the drive, is to try to, not necessarily the city fees because they tend to be low anyway. It was really in the design costs that you're going to see the savings.
That's great. And just so you mentioned site plan, Title 24, we live in a terrain with a lot of rolling hills and slopes and things. So foundation design is probably not a part of the standardized package?
Well, so it is. It's up to a 3-foot variation in elevation, and that's
wow.
keep us below the requirement for engineering. So that's why some of those layouts you see, the artist renderings were on hills, purposeful again to show that they could be installed on a hill. So in the event that a ADU is on a slope that exceeds that, so they would need a larger stem wall or a retaining wall of some sort, the applicant would have to provide that separate engineering, but they could still continue to use the package. They would just have to provide an additional engineering for the foundation design, and then they could use everything on top of that for as free design, essentially.
Excellent, John. Thank you very much. Love the idea, love the concept. Glad we're doing collaborative work with Placer County on this. Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and open it up to the rest of the council. And I see Alice's hand up, so we'll go hands. Go ahead, Alice.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm so excited about this. I really am. You know, we began talking about this, like you said, way back when I was chair of the Planning Commission, and just really incredibly pleased. I love the designs. There's just everything I love about this. And we were able to secure grant monies for it. It's just such a win-win. It really is a win-win for our community. So thank you so much for putting this forward. It's like I said, I'm so incredibly excited. This is a way that we can help to address some of our affordable housing issues. It's just, win-win all over the place. So I really do truly appreciate that. One quick question I had was, once this is up and running, how are you going to promote it? I mean, this is something we need to get out and let folks know. And do you have a plan for that?
Sure, I do. We're probably gonna try to get into the newspaper, not as an advertisement, but as an article. We want to get them over and really push it out. Obviously, Placer County is going to push it out. And it should go live on the Placer County website. I believe it went live a couple days ago. So the information is there, and you'll see the renderings on their website. We're going to obviously push it out on our website and through Facebook and all those other electronic means. And I am spreading the word as much as I can. We really have a lot of interest already because people that want ADUs have already asked the questions about what they need to do. And so they're getting the response, which is, well, we want to design an 800 square footer. And I'm responding, well, just wait a few months and we can give you a 749, right? So the response from the public has been amazing. So we're really excited. I don't know that advertisement shouldn't be a problem. I think once the word gets out, if they want them, they're going to find them.
Well, again, job well done. Very, very excited for our community. I think this is just phenomenal. So happy to see it finally come to fruition. And thank you so very much. That concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the next hand up was Vice Mayor Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor Spokely. I'll put my hand down now. Well, I just want to say that this is something I'm very passionate about. I have a son that lives in an ADU in Sacramento, and they've streamlined it quite well there. And it's, we have such a need for affordable housing, as you said, and we have limited space. So this is a real asset to our community. And I appreciate the hard work you did. I appreciate you using all the resources that you did to come up with this. And I'm especially excited to hear that there's interest. And I was going to ask the same question as Councilwoman Alice Dowden-Cavillo asked, how will we promote it? You've answered that. I really appreciate it. I just want to remind people too that parking's not an issue. If it's located, the state has come up with such ways to help us get these going. And if it's located within a half mile or walking distance of public transit, if it's within an architecturally or historically significant historical district, if it's a part of a proposed or existing primary residence or accessory structure, when there's on-street parking permits, when there's a car share vehicle program located within 1 block of the unit. So it's exciting that there's so many opportunities out here. And, I'm very supportive of this, whatever you want to call it, granny flats or ADUs. Thank you. This is great for Auburn. And I think one of the public comments was about, making it, whether these will be short-term rentals, but that's a discussion for another day. I think today, as Councilwoman Dowden said, Cavillo, we need to focus on promoting this and getting as many going as we can, because it provides us with an opportunity to have a lot of our people who would like to move into Auburn and work, and it's affordable and such a good asset. And this is a great step in the right direction. So thank you. I guess mine was just comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we'll go to Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Have to take mute off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a quick question about Title 24, since that's my background. I noticed that there's some that have more, it seems like more windows on certain sides than others. Is there going to be any help? Because I know that window orientation, like you were saying, orientation impacts it. Is there going to be any help with providing them some suggestions on which orientation or which design would work best for their orientation? Because if you get down the road and your Title 24 doesn't work because of the design of the home, I imagine that might be an issue.
Certainly. No, I totally understand. Originally we looked at doing a worst case scenario for Title 24, but it just didn't seem to be cost effective for the applicant, essentially, that it would cost them more money than it would to do them individually, potentially depending on the orientation. So we're aware of the orientation and what it means, and which side those windows don't want to be facing. And of course, we'll guide them, but on some of the cases, they'll just want it facing the way that they want it. But we will explain to them the difference between the orientations and what's going to be more beneficial to them, depending on the orientation itself.
Great. This seems great. I think that a lot of people will be very happy with this. So thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you very much, Councilman Berlant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will ask a Title 24 question as well, but keep it to the fire side of it. Will these ADUs be required to conform to Chapter 7A of the Wildland Building Codes?
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. Any new dwelling unit, and that's ADUs, single family, multifamily, and commercial, are required to meet 7A. The only question is sprinklers. I thought that was the question you were going to ask.
It's gonna be my next one, so go ahead.
So currently, that is and I say currently with a lot of these things, because as you know, these ADUs are coming fast and furious, and every year, every 6 months, we get another couple. But currently, the sprinklers are required if the existing primary residence has sprinklers, and that would also be the applicant's responsibility, because we're not able to anticipate which houses have sprinklers and which don't.
John, do you know, I know that AB 2939 was the bill in 2017 that created if the house has sprinklers, then the ADU needs to have sprinklers. But do local jurisdictions have the ability in this portion to go beyond the minimum code? Meaning, could this council say, you know what, we want to have fire sprinklers in an ADU, even if the home was built prior to 2011, which is most of our homes, and doesn't have sprinklers? Because essentially, based on when our homes were built, most homes are not going to have fire sprinklers in them. So then we're going to build all these new accessory dwelling units, and they don't have the same level of current fire protection coverage. So just curious if in this ADU realm we have the authority, should we choose to be more stringent than the minimum standard?
Yes, well, you know, ADUs is a tricky subject. I'd have to defer to Gary. I know generally the city can always go with more stringent requirements, and they just can't reduce the requirements. But the ADUs specifically, I would have to defer to legal, because it's a convoluted subject.
Gary, if you don't know the answer easily, and you can nod, then I would ask that we follow back up, because go ahead.
Yeah, so the state ADU law says that the ADU must have fire sprinklers if it's required in the primary residence, not necessarily installed. And so there's a level of interpretation there for the building official, and certainly it would be required, even though it may not be in, and it would be non-conforming given the age of the building. But to the second question, yes, you can adopt that as a modification to the building code, and I think be specific and require them.
So this is informational only, and I should have even started with, I too really, these are beyond, I think, my imagination of quality and multiple different options of different styles. So let me start with the positive, but I would ask that city staff bring back the discussion about whether or not we want to require fire sprinklers to be included in our ADUs. Gary's interpretation I really like. I just know that most homes in our city are built before they were required, and so they're not going to have the most, standard now fire protection that exists. So would ask that we at least be able to have that discussion.
If we're going to talk about changing Title 24, I also would like to talk about the HVAC that they're going to put into the building too, just to get a sense of what that level is, and if we might want to make sure that it is the right size and the right efficiency for the home or for the building, just because that's going to impact our grid, and adding all those HVACs will add up over time.
Isn't that a part of Title 24, Rachel?
It is, and we can require greater than the minimum standard for efficiency for an HVAC, and that's something that you can do on an individual basis as a city. So I just wanted to see if that's a possibility.
I think these are great questions, and Gary, obviously, we dealt with this issue when the ADU state mandate came down, and we had lots of conversations about what that meant for the city of Auburn. The 4-foot minimum setback from rear or side yards, all of those conversations, and we were told at that time that we didn't have the ability to increase those. So
but I think that's specific to the setbacks versus some of the building code minimum standards.
I understand, Daniel, but we need to look at the law from the state, because if they're saying that we can't do anything to infringe upon people's rights to build these units, one might say that if we're compliant with, our main house doesn't have sprinklers, so our ADU shouldn't be required to have sprinklers, that might be one of those infringements on the ability for folks to build these things. So I look forward to the conversation. I think that along with Rachel's comments about the Title 24 and the HVAC stuff is all good. I do know, at least based on what I heard at our previous conversations, and again, it was centered around just building setbacks, that we were told that we had very little latitude to change those requirements and make it more prohibitive to build by increasing setbacks. I would think that both of the HVAC and the sprinkler requirements would make it more prohibitive for people to build these just based on cost.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the conversations.
Can't hurt to look into it.
Yep.
So my last question, John, is based on the design. Is there any room for modification? Is there a certain percentage that if they want to put the door, a door into the hallway 5 feet over, that they can do that? Or is the plan set 100%? I guess, is there any room for modification specifically indoors allowed in these plans?
Oh, there are. I mean, if any of the non-bearing partitions, there aren't many of them, but there are some in the house themselves, can be moved or adjusted to accommodate, for instance, the kitchen cabinets being in a slightly different configuration, or the sink being moved. And that will all be looked at pretty easily through plan review, as long as it's not structural. Essentially, it's a go.
Great. And then just, I guess, to wrap up the comment that I made earlier in the question, when will the city next adopt the intervening building codes, where we can have this discussion about can and should we make any modifications to the minimum standards of Title 24?
Well, our last adoption was 2020, so the next code cycle will be 2023. We can always, as a city, adopt additional or make changes to any of the codes. So maybe that's something we need to have a discussion about, to look if we're going to move forward, or what that would mean to these type of applicants.
And maybe there's an opportunity this year to look at the intervening code cycle, so
Yeah.
we do it a little bit more faster. So, okay, thank you very much again, John. Well done. I know you brought this forward a while back in concept to us, that you had worked on it, but it's so much better for us to see the images and to really know what we're, this additional benefit that our residents have of, they really can just walk in. Yes, there's some cost to it, but like you said, 40% less, and build an accessory dwelling unit meeting all of the objectives that were already mentioned by the other council members. So I appreciate specifically your time and energy, as well as Tanya's, in whoever else, in doing this. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the questions.
Thank you very much. John, again, this was just an informational item. I want to, again, thank you, as Councilman Berlant just mentioned. The elevations and the architecture is great. I want to thank our own Michael Kent Murphy, local City of Auburn residents, for putting these renderings together. It's nice to see that we've got some pretty cool options for residents, not just a cookie cutter box that anybody could draw. It's really quite intriguing. So great program. Thank you for bringing it forward to us. Thank you for your collaboration with the county. Really appreciate that. And we will go ahead and close this item. Thank you, Mr. May.
Mayor Spokley, I have a public comment on this item.
Oh, yes, we do. You already sent it to us. I'm sorry, Amy. Please.
No problem.
We'll go ahead and open public comment and listen to or hear or read our public comment.
And that concludes public comment for this item.
Great, thank you very much. We did receive those public comments ahead of time. Amy got those out to us before our meeting. Those are all great questions for when we have action on this item. This is just a informational item. So thank you for the public comment. Any other comments from the council? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and close this item, move on to our next item, which is the city manager's report. Mr. Dunleavy.
Mayor and Council, just a couple of items. Just a reminder, March 29th in the evening and March 31st at noon, we're going to have two community budget workshops. We are working on all the details. It's going to be great with a variety of different opportunities for people who are tuning in to participate. We're going to work on an overall interactive mode for both of these public workshops. So we'll be responsible through Zoom and YouTube, but at the same time, we will have some interactive elements to it. Just as a heads up to the council, within the month, we will begin talking with Recology and looking at our options regarding our solid waste franchise, as well as the thing that the council really needs to be aware of. There is AB 1383, which has to do with organics, and it's going to make us all a little less popular as things go with the restaurants. With residential, it's not a big deal, but expect that we will be adding some things that are requirements within our overall franchise agreement. So we're going to kick into that probably within the coming month. Something that we're also working on tomorrow, we actually have a meeting with Recology dealing with our former landfill. So the next step with us is that we have some things that we're going to have to begin working with the regional board on. So we're going to be mashing through those things. Finally, SACOG has a grant, the Regional Early Action Planning Grant, also known as REAP. They have, on Friday, there is a grant application. We are currently working up some options on that. Most notably, we will probably try and get some REAP funds that would go towards some general plan element updates. The REAP money needs to go towards housing and planning, and I think there's an opportunity for us maybe to start getting some funds. One of probably the number one policy update in the city's housing element has to do with the core area of the city, the core commercial areas. So possibly we'll be able to get some money from REAP to go towards that. Without question, in the upcoming budget, we're going to have to put some money in for some general plan stuff. So it might be an opportunity to kind of balance getting some REAP money with some additional money from SACOG. And that is the city manager's report.
Great, thank you very much, John. I guess, well, let's move on to the next item. Next item that we have on the agenda is the COVID-19 economic recovery update. John, you want to take this one?
Yeah, just really quick, council adopted two items tonight, one extending the emergency. The second has to do with our working with the restaurants on things. Expect that we will get all the information out to everybody. Still enjoying working with the chamber and the business associations on various things. I will tell you that by the end of this week, we will be looking at some configurations to help with outdoor dining for downtown. Pretty easy. We're looking at the installation of some removable bollards that can go out to help facilitate some outdoor dining, as well as some outright street closures. The creativity will have to come in Old Town, just because there's a different configuration of things. But I'll tell you, I'm working with Matt Carducci from our Public Works field staff to work up some configurations of some things that ultimately what we'll do is we will kind of run it up the flagpole with the business associations to make sure that we're on the same page, and ultimately we'll bring some things back as an information item to the council. And hopefully we go to red tomorrow. Open.
Fingers crossed. That's what we're all hoping. Jackie Weston, I see you here. Do you have a update or anything you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody heard, but we got some more money for the personal services grant. Thank you, Daniel, for taking that. We're really excited to be able to give some of the larger personal services some additional money, the ones that have employees and aren't just self-employed, as well as open it back up for a few days to get some of the applicants that weren't able to get their applications in on time. I think we've already received 3 today, so that's pretty cool to get some more money out into the community. We are in the final stages. We have till the end of the month to use all the money. So right now I'm just juggling it around and trying to figure out where it all needs to go and where it needs to be spent so that we don't have to give it back. So I'm just working with the downtown and Old Town to figure out what else they need. We are officially out of heaters. We are not out of tanks, but we have more heaters coming in tomorrow because it is still going to be cool in the evening for a little while more. And we are working with a couple of the, we're working with one of the restaurants that was called out in the Placer Foundation grant to get him a little bit extra and maybe get him some cooling implements since it will be warm eventually and probably not too long off. So I want to thank Alice and April Maynard for helping me get to Royal, and to Amy for helping me get to Star Thai, and hopefully get them a little bit extra because the Locke Family Fund wants to make sure that they are well taken care of, and that is what we'll do.
Hey, Jackie, a question for you. How many heaters through the recent program, the CARES 3 program, have you've been able to push out to businesses? Just ballpark.
53.
Oh, that's pretty precise. Well done.
I was double counting them today because we're missing one somewhere. I'm hoping that maybe April had come in and given it to a business, but I haven't been able to touch bases with her. But I know no one else would take it. So either I miscounted somewhere or April came in and gave it to one of the businesses on the weekend.
That's fantastic. I saw Alice's hand up. Alice, you have a question?
Yes, just really quick. Hi, Jackie. Just wondering how many businesses are taking advantage of the structure that Echo Valley is going to be providing or selling. The cover.
Yeah, I only have, as of right now, I have one on order from Monkey Cat. They're waiting to get their deck approved for the bottom of theirs. And then I have some businesses that are outside the city. Okay. But there's been a little pushback from some of the businesses because there's wording, from what I understand, I haven't read it thoroughly, that there's some wording in the city application that says they have to be following state mandates, which is something through the city, not through the actual grant. So the businesses have lacked on requesting them due to them not being able to follow. But now that we're going into red tomorrow, almost for sure, we should be able to hopefully get some of them to move forward because we do need to get those ordered. They are something that is in high demand. So hopefully we can get those ordered next week because there's money, the money has to be spent in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yes, I'm hoping we'll be moving into red and more businesses will be able to take advantage of that as well. So thank you. Thanks for all your work. I know you've been putting in a lot of hours. So thanks so much, Jackie.
So I see Christine's hands up, but we'll go to real quickly here to Councilwoman Amaro, and then we'll get over to you, Christine.
Oh, yes. Hi. Just a quick question. Thank you, Jackie. My question is for the personal service grants, what is the range of the amount that they will get? Do you know?
So as of right now, I had from the first tranche of it, I had 63 businesses apply, but 60 were under the actual personal services. So they each got $500 because we had $30,000 allotted. We don't know exactly how much more we'll be getting. One of the other regions weren't able to spend all their money, so they're kind of allotting it in different places. So we should know by the end of tomorrow or Wednesday how much more we'll get, and that'll depend on how much more I give or we give to the larger businesses and then the new businesses as well.
So they can still apply if there's some gyms that need to, I should put them in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. They have till this Friday at 5 p.m. to apply because we did open it up on Councilman Berlant said that it would be a good idea. So I took his wise wisdom and opened it back up so that because there were some people that didn't see it or weren't able to get it in time.
And will this go for, if they apply, will it go for the second round of funding as well? Or did they reapply? You said you will be getting more in. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, I'll be getting, I've already spent the first 30,000. It's already gone. So the second round, it'll just depend on how much we get, whether we add to businesses that have applied, or if we get that many more businesses apply this week, we'll be able to fund those as well.
Okay, great. And one last question, comment. Here I am ranting again about this. I forget the name of the Mexican restaurant in South Auburn, but when their easy covering comes down, which I'm sure it will soon, really soon. I know they were kind of interested in overhang. Should I put them in touch with you again then? Because I think they're compliant. I believe they would follow all that. So
yeah, I've actually talked to them a couple times. They have some of the heaters, and they wanted to put one of the structures on the side of their building, but there just wasn't enough space. It needs at least 12 feet because they have an overhang that would block it. And it sounded like he had just bought that tent, so he just wanted to keep it up. But we have been working with them pretty closely. Okay. And I'm sure I'll end up there sometime this week going to lunch. So I'll talk to him again.
If you need some help on that, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all. Auburn tacos, they're really good.
Yes.
And we have actually gotten a really good response for the technology for people that didn't have websites and didn't have social media. There was one business, and it brought me to tears that she had saved up for 2 years to get a website built and had to spend all her money during COVID just to survive. So she was actually the first one I sent over to our web developer to get her moving. But we're juggling those a little bit. The more needed they are, the quicker they head over there, and until the funds are gone, I'll slowly feed them over to the web development company.
That's great. Thank you, Jackie. Let's move over to Christine.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to kind of give a quick update on Old Town. We do have a plan that we're working on. We have a landscaper that is putting together a few drawings for us with regard to common space. I think on the questions on the Echo Valley structures, the terrain in Old Town just really is difficult to work with for anything that's kind of prefab like that. restaurants that have those areas already have their structures built. So we're looking at doing some common area spaces, and then potentially one of the restaurants that does have some patio space might take advantage of one of the pre-built structures. But we have a package that we're working on that'll be in by the end of this week. So just a quick update on Old Town.
Great, thank you very much, Christine. Do any of the council members have questions for Christine, Old Town Business District Rep? All right, thank you again, Christine. Appreciate the update. Jackie Weston, thank you very much for all you're doing for our businesses. We greatly appreciate it. As always, if there's anything else the city can do, let us know. Daniel, thank you for all your continued support to the chamber. And John, anything to wrap up?
No, we're good.
We're good. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which are council member committee reports. And Daniel, you're upper left, so I'm going to start with you.
Sounds good. Real quick, since we skipped a couple, go back to February, the Placer County Air Pollution Control District Board met, and the item that I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention was we reviewed the regional state implementation plan. And why that's relevant to us is in a number of metrics that the federal government sets in obtaining our air quality. Wildfires and their impact from them always plays a important discussion. I'll note that for the most part, wildfires become exempt from our measurements in meeting federal requirements. So more or less, the simple way is they don't hold against us the smoke emissions in obtaining our measurements. However, we have been making good progress. And so the board discussed continued planning ways to ensure that as the ozone and fine particle matter standards continue to change, which they are always doing, that our region is meeting those. And I say our region, and the reason I flag it for everybody is Placer County does really well for the most part, but because we're in this greater Sacramento region, we get a lot of pollution that comes from below us up the valley into our region. So we have to always be working with our other counterparts to try to make measurable changes outside of our county to help our local air. And then one last thing I just wanted to mention for everybody, if you didn't notice, for quite a while there was a nice banner in our city that discussed the fireplace, the firewood and fireplace exchange incentive program, essentially trying to get old fireplaces that are wood burning devices. You can actually get pretty much a free upgrade to a more air-friendly heating system into your home. The El Dorado County Air Pollution Control District actually manages the grant program on behalf of Placer County, but if you're interested in getting an upgrade to an older wood-burning stove, I would encourage you to go visit either the Placer County or the El Dorado County Air Pollution Control District. And then I'll defer to Councilwoman down in Calvillo. She can give the update. We tag teamed, but really she gave the report out from the Chamber of Commerce Governance Committee that met last week, and there were a couple items, but I'll just end, and I know Christine from Old Town is gone, but in their February meeting, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention, because I think it continues to be a problem, and as I drove through town this weekend, it still is, and that's Old Town's probably one of their biggest issues, not to put words in Christine's mouth, has just been the trash. And I know John, and thank you to John, our city manager, for meeting with downtown and Old Town to try to come up with a resolution. But we are definitely off of our normal garbage waste that's occurring over the weekends. And so trash cans are filling up. I drove by a trash can, John, I didn't get a chance to tell you this, so sorry you have to hear it here. A trash can off of Auburn Ravine. It had 3 trash bags that somebody had changed out, but they're all sitting there. So just the example of what our business districts, but even outside our business districts, are facing. And so look forward to John solving our trash dilemmas. because Old Town, I know, and downtown would be very happy. I won't speak for downtown, but definitely Old Town. And with that, that concludes my reports. Thank you.
I just want to add, Daniel, downtown, I was Sunday morning, there were 2 trash bags next to the trash can in Central Square. So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I know the city manager is working on coming up with a resolution for that issue. It's been ongoing. The more the weather's cooperating, the more people we get coming into restaurants and they're doing takeout, you know, and we'll hopefully get a resolution that soon. Moving around my screen here, we'll go to Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Thank you. I went to the ARD board meeting and they also signed the letter about the debris removal from the old bridge that's in the river, as Placer County and many others, El Dorado County, they're getting a lot of support for that. So they're hoping to be able to move that forward. They also went through their preliminary budget and talked about their 5-year plan for all their projects. So if you have any interest, it's all on their website about all the fun things they're going to be doing with our parks and the parks in the area. They've got a lot of big plans and fun things that they're trying to do for upgrades. I also had a meeting at the Arts Commission where they talked about upgrading their website. They just completed and printed a public arts catalog. So they have all of the arts from around Auburn that they have in a catalog they've created. They printed 10 of them that they're going to put around town. If anyone wants more than that, then we can always print up more, but they have all that information that's also going to be online as well. And talked a little bit more about trying to get the Carnegie Library upgrades started and how that nonprofit will start to have that be more of a building that we can use for the arts in the community. So those were the main things.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Vice Mayor Amaro next.
Thank you, Mayor Spokely. Okay, I attended the DBA board meeting, and the main, well, first of all, the fun things, the umbrellas will be up at the end of May. They're hoping to have some music by then. They have heard, I don't think it's sponsored by DBA, but St. Patrick's Day Parade is going to occur 5:15 on the 17th, day after my birthday. Of interest to us is, they're still working on a restaurant week. That'll probably be in the fall. They're working hard on a DBA website, in an interactive website. And the music, they would like to start that again on Friday and Saturday nights. And they're working toward that. And there was a lot of interest and time spent on the interest of having the one-way going up Lincoln Way. And I think they're going to explore that further. There's a real interest by the committee there. And they want to do whatever they can to help facilitate that. Then I went to the PC TPA. There's a big learning curve there, but I loved it. It was great. A lot of acronyms. Great group though. And the important thing for us to be aware of, that on Thursday, May 13th, from 4:30 to 6:30, they want to have Auburn hold a forum whereby we have a discussion, because they would like to put a half-cent sales tax on the ballot. And so we're going to have a little workshop in Auburn, but further, Amy is working on that to get that going. Thank you, Amy. Then I attended the mosquito vector. That was before the last meeting. And the big important thing too, that came out of that I would like all of you, since most of you are runners and hikers, is be aware that there are a lot of ticks. I wasn't aware there were ticks because I thought the grass was too short, but the ticks now are in full force. The deers are dropping them. They're at the very ends of the grasses. As you walk by, they're looking for hosts. So dress up, wear clothing, and avoid the ticks because they're in full force, and some are Lyme causing. So be careful. So anyway, that was a fun piece of information. And then the sustainability committee again is they set they're working on setting their priorities. I think I reported last time, I'm not sure, but there is another vacancy. There's one member Ann Stacy, who was on the committee, but she had an opportunity to be involved in something that's taking all of her time. So that's going to be advertised and hopefully filled soon. And then that's it. So that's all I have to report. Busy couple weeks.
Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Councilwoman Down Calvillo.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have several items to report as well. So the Pioneer Energy Board of Directors met a couple weeks ago. We were able to accomplish several things, but first I wanted to let you know that today we got word from that the CPUC has approved the expansion to serve El Dorado County and Placerville. So that's great news. Just received that. Also, the board approved a program to provide financial relief to individuals who may not be able to pay their bill due to COVID. It's the arrears management plan program, and so we should expect to see a rollout of that to help some of our more financially strapped customers. In addition, we adopted a renewable rate for consumers that are interested in renewable energy. It's 100% renewable rate where customers that are interested will enter into a contract for a time specified in which they'll be enrolled in that renewable rate. Pioneer will only purchase that extra renewable energy when they have the contract signed for the individual. So we won't be purchasing extra and setting it aside, hoping that people will come. We'll purchase it when we know that people signed up. So excited about that program as well. Let's see here. I also attended the SHAC committee. Lots of discussion at that particular committee with regards to tile and tile placements, and expect to see them come before the council in May with the series of tiles that they'd like to have installed in June. Also, we'll be working with Andy to ensure that monies that are deposited to SHAC are reserved for the tile installation, because third parties are paying for those installations and want to make sure that the money doesn't get lost or go to the general fund after each budget year if those tiles have not been installed during the same fiscal year that the funds have been deposited. So we'll be working with Andy just to make sure that that's straight. The State Theater, they have a new executive director, Miles Merrick, has started. So he comes with a tremendous amount of experience. I know that everyone there is very excited about him coming on board. Also, they're doing quite a bit of modernization there at the theater, including offering a new ticketing program. So we should see that on their website as well. They are contracting with a new vendor. So really good improvements on that end. Also, the Chamber's Governmental Affairs, there was a good summary of all the different grant programs that are in play. Also, I know that they asked for a copy of our economic development director's job description. So I know that our city manager is getting that to them. And then they also are going to be taking a more proactive role with the school boards and encouraging them to go back in person learning and supporting the school boards if they choose to move in that direction. And let's see here. There was one other item and I didn't write that. Let's see. There was, they also heard a recommendation from Mike Holmes asking for their support of the Western States run and the Tevis Cup make them the state endurance events within California. As you know, our council voted to approve that, or support that, actually, to support that endeavor. Placer County, City of Colfax, and other jurisdictions have supported that. That really is being spearheaded by Mike Holmes. So they had some questions, though, just with regards to potential concerns that they didn't want to draw some negative attention or actually have some negative effects if they were to support that, because of the partnerships that they have. They have an exemption going on the some of the federal lands, the wildlife lands, wildland lands. Anyway, it's late, I'm tired. So they're just kind of concerned about that. And they were going to ask the ride and the run to come and talk about whether or not they are interested in having that delegation. So they'll be hearing that, and Daniel will be attending that meeting. So, and that pretty much concludes all that I have to report this evening.
Thank you very much, Alice. Appreciate that. So I did have a SACOG Transportation Subcommittee meeting last week, pardon me. We went over, primarily focused on the funding cycle for the 4-county region, which doesn't include Placer County, because we have PCTPA that manages our state and federal allocated funds for our various projects in the county. So it was interesting to hear, the big cities kind of grappling for their slice of the pie. I do want to kind of touch on the funding sources that John had mentioned earlier, the REAP funding sources, the competitive grant funding sources, and the other funding sources, which are kind of, they just come to the city based on population numbers. Those are both funding sources that we can use for things like John mentioned, for possibly getting our general plan to update moving forward. So those are items that we're tracking pretty closely at SACOG. There are competitive funds as well that we're also looking into. So a couple of good opportunities there. The other meeting that I have is tomorrow night with EDC, and John and I will be attending that meeting tomorrow evening. And that's all I have. Any other comments before we adjourn this meeting? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Everybody have a wonderful night. Thank you. Take care.